Imagine two royal cousins doing almost exactly the same thing in almost exactly the same week, and only one of them ends up defending themselves in headlines for days afterward. That's not a hypothetical setup for tonight's video. It's basically the recurring pattern that's kept resurfacing across royal coverage for years now, and it's exactly the question ITV's own Talking Royals team sat down to actually examine after Harry and Meghan's most recent trip to Australia. So instead of just reacting to the headline "Double Standard Exposed," we thought it was worth actually doing what the segment itself set out to do. Walk through the specific comparisons being raised and honestly assess which of them hold up and which of them might be a little more complicated than a single viral clip can capture.
I'm Charlene White, and the lovely Chris and Lizzie are with us in the studio today. And we're also delighted to join, in fact, live from Australia, from Sydney, Australia, by Hugh Whitfold, who is Channel 7's foreign editor. And you guys, I think they have made, yes, there are elements of making money on this tour, but they are not working royals. And they're not the first to do it. So what's the problem? They've been meeting military veterans, survivors of family violence, and a women's shelter, all charities, Lizzie, who have not paid her or them to turn up.
Yeah, it does have, in parts, it does feel very much like when they were working members of the family. But the big difference here, as both Chris and Hugh have said, are the moments where they do things from a business sense.
Yes.
And, when they stepped back as working members of the royal family, they said that they wanted to be financially independent. So should we be surprised that some elements of this tour have got the business within them? Probably not. But people are always going to criticise Harry and Meghan, aren't they?
And that's the thing.
And that's the thing. People either love them or they don't, and they're going to say negative things.
But I think the vitriol and anger that may exist both here and in Australia as well, Hugh, I would say conveniently ignores the fact that they are not the first non-working royals to do this. Zara Phillips and Mike have been doing this for years, absolutely years. And I know that they do have quite a big following in Australia, don't they, Hugh? And they do a lot of brand deals in Australia. They are non-working royals who I would argue, Hugh, have been the blueprint for this and yet have not received the same level of vitriol for doing the same thing. Am I right for thinking that way, Hugh?
Yeah, every January for the last, probably more than 10 years, I think, Zara Tindall has been coming out to Australia for the Magic Millions. It's a big horse racing carnival on the Gold Coast.
So some of her meetings have been about, how can I expand as ever?
Yes.
What would it look like? How would I do it? What are the logistics? And also, you match that up with what she did on 10 Network. Sorry, Hugh, I know that's not your TV station, but she's appeared as a guest judge on MasterChef Australia because,
I think it's a genius idea.
What's as ever about? It's about hosting and entertaining and cooking and all the rest of it. It's genius that she's turned up as there she is.
I think
enjoying the moment.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think once again, and it's not, I know Mike, and it's not that I am beating Mike Tindall down in any way, shape, or form, but again, it is a well-worn route taken by another two working royals. Mike has a gin company which does well sales-wise, of which he is he is an investor in, and that does very well. Mike was on I'm a Celebrity. Mike was doing adverts for Domino's Pizza, which did very well for his podcast. Once again, they're not the first that have done it. No. This has been done before. However, it's the reaction to it that I think I have an issue.
Well, I think you've got certain publications, certain newspapers, both here and in Australia, as I'm sure Hugh will tell us, that would just stick to their lane. And some newspapers, their lane is we criticise Harry and Meghan no matter what they do.
Yes.
If William and Kate did exactly the same thing, and if Kate wore a dress or then revealed where it came from, then those newspapers will say, well, she dazzled, she looked amazing, and certain newspapers are just unable to move lanes, and they stick to where they're used to being.
Yeah. And one of the big questions over this trip is who's paying for it. Well, actually, Harry and Meghan are funding it privately. The security detail that you see around Harry and Meghan are theirs. They pay for that. Yes, there is policing on the streets provided by the Australians, and again, they've been criticised for that has taken Australian money. But the public does have to be kept safe. And there's a lot of people. I think I've been actually quite surprised seeing the numbers of people turning out to see them, clearly still excited.
Yeah, and when we talk about the way in which they are portrayed in media, both here and in Australia, it does lead me to the words that Meghan was talking about, which she sort of talked about being bullied and attacked online when they were talking about better protections online. Let's take a listen to what she said.
Every day for 10 years, I've been bullied and attacked. And I was the most trolled person in the entire world, man or woman. And I'm still here.
How has that been received in Australia, Hugh? Are people dealing with it in the way they ought to be, which is looking at the damaging effects of bullying online?
I think it's been a good chance for Meghan to talk about it from her perspective, because we don't hear from her very much, really, to be honest, apart from the huge platform that she has in the various Netflix series that she's done and the interviews that she's done. But realistically, we don't actually hear from her a lot. So I guess it's a chance for her to, as she will have said previously, to make sure her truths or her true stories are out there. I think for the most part, though, when we talk about those narratives that certain parts of the media like to stick to, it's very hard for them to pursue negative lines of attack on Meghan and Harry in this particular instance, because for the most part, they've been really good at what they do. And I think for some people, probably the saddest part out of all of this is that we get to see what Harry and Meghan might have been if they'd stayed in the royal family, if they'd stayed as working royals, because they bring another level of gloss and glamour and pizzazz to the royal brand. And if they had kept that inside the working royal family, wow, it would have been amazing, because when you see the way that those kids reacted to Harry and Meghan, when you see the way that Meghan is able to talk to people, there is something special there.
And we've mentioned that before, Chris, haven't we? That will they eventually see this as a missed opportunity in terms of the firm, in terms of the royal family?
Yeah, not for the first time. We're talking about what Harry and Meghan could have done had they stayed within the royal family, and then they could have gone to Australia and no one would have spoken about the cost of the security. I mean, how much did it cost to look after the King and Queen when they were in Australia on that visit as head of state, as the King remains in Australia a couple of years ago? And actually, Hugh, I mean, the debate there was pretty big, wasn't it, before they got there about, oh God, who's paying for this? Has it gone away now that they're actually there, or are people still a little bit disgruntled about the who's footing the bill?
No, I think it has largely gone away, and in part because we're not seeing, I guess, signs of a huge amount of money being spent by the public purse, because it's not there. We're not seeing huge barriers and streets shut off and public parks being shut down and security swiping people and things like that. We're not seeing uniformed officers surrounding them. There's private security. They're going to private places that can be managed, where the university manages security itself in Melbourne, Swinburne University, where they were this week. The Interreg Summit in Melbourne, that's in a private convention centre. So that is able to be managed within that, rather than relying on the Victorian Police Force or the New South Wales Police Force being there in numbers with uniforms and barriers and making a big deal out of it all. When they walked through the Riverside Walk along the Yarra in Melbourne, there were no cops there. There were no police officers there. They were just kind of walking along with some of the Indigenous guides who were leading them. And it was all very low key, and the crowds kind of were there organically, people stumbling across them on their morning walk, which was kind of nice, really.
Yeah. There are deliberately you'll notice there's no walkabouts in the programme. When we go on royal tours, you get a lot of those walkabouts, and it's a chance for members of the royal family to meet the public, which they really like to do. But there aren't any of those moments in this programme, and that is because that would require a lot more policing.
They know what will create negative headlines. They know what will create positive headlines. And Chris, I know that you were appalled by the cost of Meghan's dress that she wore to a homeless shelter. That's made quite big headlines.
No. I think some newspapers were appalled by the cost of the. I was just appalled by the cost of the outfits generally, not where she was wearing them or what they are. But we now know how much they are because she has invested in this website called oneoff.world. So she's not only an investor, but then she puts up the clothes that she's worn.
Yeah.
Some of them were Australian designers. Don't ask me to name them because I've already forgotten them. You can actually see how much it costs. You can click on it, and therefore she will get revenue from that. Others do it as well. All I'm saying is, I mean, it was quite an expensive outfit, but then Kate wears expensive outfits. How much do those ball gowns cost when you go to a state
but also,
banquet?
I think people were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe she's worn such an expensive outfit to go to a homeless shelter." Well, when Kate in 2018 wore, I think it was like a 4-figure coat to go to a hostel.
Yeah.
I searched and I searched and I searched for negative headlines about the 4-figure
What did you find?
coat.
You find the tabloid saying she looked amazing, she looked wonderful.
In fact, I think the word was used in one publication that she dazzled.
Yes, well,
in the 4-figure
one publication was right,
coat.
so she dazzled no matter what, and there was therefore no criticism that she wore an expensive dress, frock, coat, whatever it was, to a homeless shelter, whereas Meghan did get a lot of.
And she looked great, and people will buy it, and whatever. That's how the world works.
I mean, she also wore that dress to the previous engagement, and okay, there would have been time. There's always time, isn't there, for her to change? But it wasn't like she just turned up direct to that engagement.
And if she changed, they're like, then there would be negative headlines about her changing outfits too much.
I mean, I was quite amazed by
win.
how quickly, like a photo, bang, and yesterday's outfit that she wore on MasterChef was already up there, and you can click on the shoes.
Can capture. Welcome back to Royal Truth Desk. Tonight, we're unpacking the ITV Talking Royals discussion built around Harry and Meghan's Australia tour, the various comparisons it raised, from the Tindall's commercial ventures to Meghan's coverage, private security funding, online bullying, and comparisons with Kate Middleton, and what all of that might actually mean for how we understand coverage of Prince William, King Charles, and the wider family. If that kind of careful source-by-source breakdown is what you come here for, go ahead and subscribe now, because we've got a genuinely full plate tonight. Let's start with the actual trip itself, because the specifics matter a lot for understanding why this debate happened in the first place. Harry and Meghan travelled to Australia this past April for their first visit there since their official 2018 royal tour, this time explicitly framed as a privately funded, non-royal visit. Their office described the 4-day trip as focused on mental health, community resilience, and support for veterans and their families, alongside private meetings and special projects. In practice, that meant a real substantial mix of charitable engagements. A visit to Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital, where Harry's own grandmother had opened the facility decades earlier and his parents had visited in the 1980s. A stop at a women's shelter. Time with the Invictus community out on Sydney Harbour. Engagements at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. And partnerships with mental health organisations, including Movember and the Australian group Batia. Meghan also made a notable guest appearance, judging MasterChef Australia during the trip. A lighter moment that got its own separate wave of coverage entirely. Alongside all of that, though, there were also ticketed commercial elements to the visit. Meghan appeared at a ticketed Girls' Weekend retreat event in Sydney, and Harry spoke at the Inter-Edge Summit in Melbourne, an event exploring leadership and workplace well-being, with tickets ranging from a general delegate rate up to a platinum tier. That combination, genuine charity engagements sitting alongside paid speaking appearances, is precisely what sparked the ITV Talking Royals segment in the first place, with the team directly asking whether the criticism the Sussexes received for blending charitable and commercial elements on the same trip was actually fair, or whether it reflected something closer to a double standard, given how other royal adjacent figures have handled similar situations. So let's actually get into the specific comparisons raised, starting with the one that's arguably the most concrete and easiest to verify: Zara and Mike Tindall's commercial activities. This isn't a new comparison. Royal commentators, including journalist Omid Scobie, have pointed out for years that the Tindalls regularly monetize their royal connections through brand ambassadorships and paid partnerships, with Zara reportedly earning several £100,000 through individual campaign deals without facing anywhere near the same level of public criticism the Sussexes tend to receive for similar commercial activity. That's a genuinely well-documented pattern, not just a one-off observation, and it's one of the stronger, more evidence-backed threads in this whole double-standard conversation, precisely because it's not really about interpretation. It's a fairly direct comparison of two royal-adjacent couples doing structurally similar things and receiving very different levels of scrutiny for it. The hand-holding comparison belongs in this same category, and it's actually one of the more frequently cited examples in this ongoing debate. Back in 2022, during the Queen's lying in state procession, Harry and Meghan were criticised online for holding hands as they left Westminster Hall, while photos quickly circulated showing Zara and Mike Tindall doing the exact same thing in the same setting without drawing anywhere near the same criticism. That comparison spread widely on social media at the time, specifically because it was so visually direct. Two royal couples, the same gesture, wildly different public reactions. It's become something of a go-to reference point in these double-standard conversations, precisely because it's hard to argue there was some meaningful behavioural difference driving the disparity in reaction. Now, Meghan's outfit controversy is a murkier thread to pin down specifically, because outfit controversy has honestly described a recurring pattern across nearly every trip Meghan has taken since 2018, rather than one single, easily identifiable incident from this particular Australia visit. What is well documented, though, is the broader pattern researchers have identified in how Meghan's fashion and public appearances get covered compared to other royal women. The same outfit choice or gesture frequently gets framed very differently in headlines, depending on who's wearing it, something media analysts have studied and quantified rather than just alleged. So, while we can't point to one specific confirmed outfit incident from this exact Australia trip with full certainty, the broader pattern this criticism sits inside of is genuinely well established. Private security funding is a thread we've covered in real depth on this channel before, and it remains one of the most concrete, well-documented pieces of this entire ongoing story. Harry lost his automatic UK police protection in 2020 and has fought that decision through the court since, losing his most recent appeal. He's said directly and repeatedly that unresolved security concerns are the single biggest practical obstacle affecting how and when his family travels, including within the UK itself. For an international trip like this one to Australia, security costs would have been privately arranged and funded, separate from any UK police protection dispute entirely. But the broader argument frequently raised in this space is that other minor or non-working royals, including the Tindalls, aren't subject to nearly the same level of public scrutiny over how their security and travel costs get handled, even though the underlying funding structures are genuinely different depending on each person's specific status and location. Online bullying is, unfortunately, one of the more thoroughly documented threads in this entire conversation. Meghan has spoken publicly about the volume and intensity of online harassment she's received since becoming a public figure, and this isn't limited to her own account of it. Outside researchers and organisations tracking online abuse have separately documented disproportionate volumes of hostile, often racially charged commentary directed at her compared to other royal women, across multiple platforms and over an extended period. That's genuinely one of the better substantiated claims in this whole debate, resting on independent research rather than just personal testimony or fan sentiment. The Kate Middleton comparison threads through basically all of the above, rather than standing as its own separate point, and it's worth being precise about what that comparison actually claims and doesn't claim. Nobody serious is arguing Kate herself has done anything wrong, or that she bears any personal responsibility for how coverage of her compares to coverage of Meghan. The argument, as it's typically made, is about the media apparatus surrounding both women, that comparable choices, gestures, or public moments have tended to generate warmer, more favourable coverage when Kate is involved, and more critical, suspicious coverage when Meghan is involved, even when the underlying behaviour is genuinely similar. That's a claim about press behaviour and framing patterns, not a claim about either woman's personal conduct. And it's worth keeping that distinction clear rather than letting it collapse into something that sounds like it's pitting the two women against each other personally. So, pulling all of these threads together, some of them are genuinely strong, well-documented comparisons. The Tindall's commercial activity, the hand-holding photos, the online harassment research. Others, like the specific outfit controversy from this particular trip, sit inside a real broader pattern, but are harder to pin down as one clean, individually verified incident. And the security funding comparison involves genuinely different underlying legal and logistical circumstances for different royal family members, even if the public scrutiny gap itself is real and worth examining. It's also worth asking honestly why ITV's own team chose to frame this as a direct question. Is the criticism unfair, rather than just reporting the trip and letting commentary follow separately? That framing itself suggests the imbalance has become significant enough that even a mainstream outlet's own royal correspondents felt it was worth directly interrogating on air, rather than treating it as a settled, uncontroversial matter. That's genuinely notable, because ITV's royal coverage team isn't generally characterised as an outlet with a strong editorial lean in either direction on Harry and Meghan specifically, which makes their choice to frame this explicitly as a fairness question worth taking seriously in its own right. What does any of this mean for the wider family? William, Charles, and beyond. Mostly, it reinforces a pattern that's been building for years now. Coverage of the monarchy doesn't apply one single uniform standard evenly across every family member. Different royals get different levels of scrutiny for structurally similar behaviour, and that disparity tends to track less with what people actually do and more with which royal is doing it. That's a real, substantive finding with genuine implications for how seriously we should take individual controversies as they arise. Because if the underlying scrutiny itself is unevenly applied, then any single incident needs to be evaluated with that broader context in mind, rather than treated as automatically damning on its own. So where does that leave the core question this whole segment was built around? Was the Harry and Meghan double standard finally exposed on ITV? Based on what's actually documented, the honest answer is that several of the strongest comparisons raised do genuinely hold up under scrutiny, while a couple of the softer ones sit inside real broader patterns without being individually perfectly nailed down. That's a nuanced answer rather than a simple, satisfying, yes, confirmed. But we think it's the honest one. And honestly, we think ITV's own team landed in roughly the same nuanced place, rather than delivering some kind of unqualified verdict either way. So, what's your take? Do you think the strongest comparisons here, the Tindall's commercial deals, the hand-holding photos, the documented online harassment research, genuinely prove an uneven standard? Or do you think there are still meaningful differences between these situations that get lost in a side-by-side comparison? And what do you make of ITV's own team choosing to frame this as an open fairness question rather than settling it one way or the other? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. We'd genuinely love to hear where you land on this one. Before we wrap up, if you appreciated us actually going through each comparison individually instead of just accepting the double standard exposed framing wholesale, do us a favour and subscribe to Royal Truth Desk if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you catch it the next time one of these fairness debates resurfaces. If you're already subscribed, drop a like. Share this with someone who's been arguing about this exact comparison online, and let us know in the comments which of these specific threads, the Tindalls, the hand-holding, the security funding, the online harassment research, you find most convincing on its own. And here's the thought we want to leave you with tonight. A pattern doesn't need every single individual example to be perfectly airtight in order to be real. Sometimes the strongest evidence isn't one dramatic smoking gun. It's a handful of smaller, genuinely well-documented comparisons that all happen to point in the same direction, again and again, over years rather than one single week. Stay curious, stay willing to check the comparisons yourself rather than just trusting the thumbnail, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching Royal Truth Desk.